the enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
I'm against the people.
Oh, welcome to Enemy of the People.
Enemy of the people.
He said it. Revolution is coming. Revolution is here. This is our first real podcast. Reel it up. And what's on the agenda today?
Yeah, well, today, we're going to be talking both about present enemies of the people, like Roland Martin, a journalist, and also a historic person, Ida B. Wells,
Yeah.
who was extraordinary. And we're going to be talking about current issues and issues of the past.
That's right.
So Roland, anyway, what did Roland do? Roland has his own videocast, daily vidcast and podcast, and on it he had a
Arkansas State Senator.
Okay. And
Was very vehemently opposed to the legislation, the Stand Your Ground legislation.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
And we're going to hear from her.
okay.
And let's do that
Should
now.
we go to her now?
Let's do that now.
Okay. Here she is.
I saw this video of an Arkansas state lawmaker who let her colleagues have it over the issue of Stand Your Ground. This was a committee hearing, and Stephanie Flowers, state senator in Arkansas, she spoke for a whole bunch of black folks. Press play.
And it doesn't take much to look on the local news every night and see how many black kids, black boys, black men are being killed with these stand your ground defenses that these people raise, and they get off. So I take issue with that. I'm the only person here of color, okay? I am a mother too, and I have a son. And I care as much for my son as y'all care for y'all's. But my son doesn't walk the same path as yours does. So this debate deserves more time. I'm in Pine Bluff. We have killings regularly down there. That for a long time since I've been back here in Arkansas, I have feared for my son's life. Now he's 27, he's out of Arkansas. And I thank God he is. When you're bringing up crap like this, it offends me. And then to limit the debate too, this is crazy. You don't have to worry about your children, Will. I worry about my son. And I worry about other little black boys and girls. And people coming into my neighborhood, into my city, saying they got open carry rights, walking down in front of my doggone office in front of the courthouse. That's a bully. Do I have a right to stand my ground with some crazy ass person walking around with a doggone gun? I don't know what the hell he intends to do. But I know I am scared. I feel threatened. Just like some of y'all walking around here up in the legislature with these damn guns. That, what's his name, Garner came in here, walking around here with a damn gun under his coat. You can see the damn print.
Senator, you need to stop.
No, I don't.
Yes, you do.
No, I don't. What the hell are you gonna do? Shoot me?
Senator.
Senator shit. What the hell? I'm telling you, this deserves more attention. You want to come up here with all these little NRA bills and bills that Alec have and all that stuff. I'm talking about my son's life. And I'm talking about the lives of other black kids. Do what the hell you want to do. Go ahead, but you can't silence me. You got your damn silence gun out the damn chamber today, but you are not going to silence me.
That's a black woman, Fatima.
Look, this is what it looks like when black women are sick and tired of being sick and tired, and
Like when he told her to calm down.
Listen, she was naming names. She was not about to calm down. And you felt her pain as a black mother, as a black woman. And why is she the only black woman? I don't know how large that body is, but why is she the only black woman there? And that tells you everything.
Joseph, it failed in committee 4-3. The sponsor said he's going to bring it back up. But she let him have it.
Oh, absolutely, with both barrels, to torture the analogy, and deservedly so. I mean, these open carry laws are sweeping across the Southeast. They're sweeping across the United States by extension, and it is jeopardizing not only black people, but white people as well.
Wow, that was something, huh?
The enemy of the people.
Oh, man.
She knows how to tell it.
Oh, yes.
She knows how to tell it.
But, the stand your ground or shoot first laws are back in the headlines after Florida sheriff declined to arrest a concealed carry permit holder who shot an unarmed black man in front of his 5-year-old child during an altercation over a handicapped parking spot.
Of course.
And, of course, the NRA has been pushing stand your ground law and lax gun laws. And, of course, minorities end up paying the price for this laws. What's the history? There's a long history on that. These laws either provide immunity from prosecution or defense during trials and cases which persons use deadly force in public, even if he or she can safely retreat. The obvious consequences. The armed citizens are more emboldened to escalate public altercations.
Seen that before.
Yes.
The enemy of the people, I call
And
them.
people of color are paying the price, as we said. Stand your ground laws, although relatively new in their concept of being passed. I mean, they have a history of was the Castle Doctrine. Goes way back to English law.
Yeah, which essentially said, if someone breaks into your home,
Your castle.
or your castle,
Who can afford
you have
a castle,
the right
right?
to defend that.
And who could afford castles back then?
Yeah, that's right.
It's people who own property.
Yes, lots of property.
Yes, indeed. But,
The enemy of the people, I call them.
so yes, stand your law. Stand your ground laws are been passed in 25 states up to this point.
Yeah, and so people like Roland are reporting on this stuff to try and help challenge it, and of course the activists out there, including the senator, are speaking up in states around the country, and you can probably catch up on this any place in your state or and find out what's going on there.
What's going on? Yeah.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
Yeah, so this is the kind of stuff that we want to report on. The stuff that's happening every day.
Every day affect
and
our communities.
There are hundreds and hundreds of these stories. And people who report on them oftentimes get into trouble, and people criticize them and come after them. And
try to stop debate. Its tracks.
We know, we had this recent report now that Fox News has in fact buried a story before the election, right before the election, by one of their own reporters who had uncovered the story of the payoff to the woman who had an affair with the resident.
Yep.
Resident at that time, the candidate. And so here, rather than acting as the news that they need to act as, they were acting as an agent agent
Basically,
of one
agent
of the
of the state.
candidates of the election. Yeah.
Controlled media.
Yeah, so we have to challenge that stuff as often as we can. And I did want to share a little something that I found in the paper not long ago. Here in Cleveland, the Plain Dealer has been a newspaper daily for, 150 years now, something like that. And their current editor wrote something about investigative journalists, and I just wanted to share a little of his article.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
There's movie journalism, and then there's real life. In the movies, we are in the year of living dangerously, barreling through roadblocks and miraculously avoiding a spray of bullets from an AK-47. We are Robert Redford in the parking garage with Deep Throat. We are Walter Burns and Hildy Johnson in the front page, hiding an accused murderer in a roll-top desk. In real life, we are Rachel Dissel and Bree Zeltner stuck in an airless, fluorescently lighted conference room. We spent weeks fighting for public documents. Now we are digging through them, piecing together a picture of the city's failure to end the poisoning of local children by lead. That's terrible cinema, but it helped spur meaningful reform and led to the creation of the city's new lead task force. It will save thousands of children from early ruination. And this is the kind of thing that real journalism is about, real investigative journalism. You're digging into all kinds of stuff. It's very tedious work at times, and sometimes it's very dangerous work. As Mr. Khashoggi found out, it can be dangerous.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
But so today, for the latter part of our session, we want to talk a little bit about Ida B. Wells.
Before we go there, though, I just want to comment on how all these news organizations have cut back on their investigative journalists. In fact, Plain Dealer let 29 people go or something recently.
Yeah.
And that was mostly in investigating. They're gonna run stories from national syndication or something. But local stuff has been cut back. I mean, local television news has been cut way back. So it's a challenge to get the message out there, what's going on in our communities.
Ida, who was born in the 1860s in slavery, became the first African woman journalist to edit and co-own her own newspapers, both in Memphis and in Chicago. In Chicago with her husband, Frederick Barnett. And it was very unusual. This is the 1880s and 90s. She's doing she's a full editor, and she's major feature writer on the newspaper. And Ida reported on all kinds of issues, civil rights issues and so forth, but even, in fact, before she even got into the newspaper business, when she was a school teacher, she sued the railroad
activist
for pulling her out of a car and forcibly putting her in a different railroad car.
Early Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Or Gandhi.
And she sued, and she won, although the Tennessee Supreme Court reversed the decision.
Yeah, naturally.
Saying that she wasn't really there to ride, she was there to cause this trouble.
Enemy of the people.
Yes, enemy of the people.
The enemy of the people, I call
So anyway, so then she went on
sense.
to, and she's most famous for her work exposing lynching. Lynching, which was something that went on for 100 years almost, right up into the 60s. There were people who were getting lynched, and they mostly were African American men, overwhelmingly African American men. And as Wells proved in her research, and she did quite extensive research on this, was usually, the men were usually falsely accused of raping a white woman, and the men were usually men who were commercially successful in the black community. They were people who were getting ahead. And the local white community members, some couldn't accept that and wanted to make sure that black people got the message. And so time after time, black men would be, without trial, would be lynched for these supposed crimes. And Now, Wells was also a women's rights activist and demonstrated with women around the country. She was one of the founders of the NAACP and actually also started the NAACW, which was for black women. And she generally was, quite a muckraker.
Yep.
The enemy of the people, I call
And we were talking before we started the show today. We were talking about the whole issue of why isn't there a film about her?
Hey, screenwriters out there.
Yeah, I mean this is
a story to be told.
This is a giant of a person.
Yep.
This is a person
So much
that
history there.
we should shout from the mountaintops about.
Change agent.
A real American revolutionary. Somebody we can all be proud of. And so this is a salute to Ida B. Wells. And we're happy to be here making noise in her spirit.
There you go. Right on.
The enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
Ida B. Wells was born in 1862 in the middle of the Civil War in Holly Springs, Mississippi, which was actually contested territory and kept being claimed by the Confederates and then by the Union. She lived through really tumultuous times. She was also orphaned at an early age. Her parents were killed in the yellow fever epidemic of the 1870s that swept through the Mississippi Valley. And she was left at 16 years old to take care of her 5 surviving brothers and sisters. After her parents passed, their friends were going to take the children and split them up, and Ida did not want this to happen. She became a teacher essentially to support her brothers and sisters and keep the family together. She's only 16, but she had basic education, which was enough in those days to teach at a rural country school where she'd educate black children. She had a lot of responsibility at an early age, and she managed to somehow rise to it. By the early 1880s, Ida had moved to Memphis, and she was still teaching in rural schools, so she was traveling back and forth to work on what was then a newfangled thing, which was a train. One day, she took her seat in what was then known as the ladies' car. It was the second car on the train. They typically only had 2, and they were reserved for women. They were non-smoking, they were sometimes more comfortable, and Wells had ridden in them previously, but this particular day, she was told that she could not sit in it. She insisted that she could. She had bought a ticket for that car, and she ended up having an enormous fight with the conductor. He tried to pull her out physically. She bit him. They cast her out. She got a ride home in a wagon and immediately sued the railroad. Her suit wound through the courts for several years. In the lower courts, she won. The judge said that she was a respectable-looking person. She was, in fact, a lady, so there's no reason why she shouldn't ride in the ladies' car. But when it got to the state Supreme Court, she lost. Tennessee was in the process of implementing segregation during this time, which really took shape after the Civil War, so she couldn't win. She was devastated by not winning, but it turned her into an activist. That was sort of the beginning of her activism. And it was also the beginning of her being a journalist, because she wrote up her experience in a church newspaper called The Living Way. Wells became a leader in anti-lynching and essentially almost invented it, I would say, because of a sort of terrible personal experience she had. It was a terrible lynching in Memphis in which 3 black men were killed, and one of them was a man named Thomas Moss, a local businessman as well as the local mailman who was a friend of Wells along with his wife. Wells is out of town when this happens, and she comes back to find black people fleeing Memphis, her friend Thomas dead along with 2 other men. She had been thinking that, she would live in the South and she would work to make it a better place. But when she looked at someone like Thomas Moss, who had been a devout churchgoer, taught Sunday school, invested in his own business, done everything that the sort of world said that blacks needed to do to get ahead, and then had ended up being lynched, she began to question whether you could really do anything in the South. She published an editorial that went essentially too far in saying all this, and a white mob stormed the office of the Free Speech and destroyed the printing press. Wells was fortunate she wasn't there, but the mob left a note basically telling whoever was printing the newspaper that they should leave town and putting a death threat. She ended up in New York, where she was hired by T. Thomas Fortune, the publisher of the New York Age, and led what was basically sort of the first anti-lynching campaign, where she identified lynching as a crime and was trying to push the government and social reformers to take action about it. Anti-lynching would become a major commitment for the NAACP, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and it would also be a major commitment of black women's clubs and other civil rights organizations. Wells seems to have been a sort of natural feminist from the beginning. She never really seemed to see any reason why she couldn't do everything a man could do. And the fact that she had to support her brothers and sisters from an early age may have sort of shaped her idea of herself as someone who was, sort of head of a family. All of her positions on women were progressive. She was always in support of women's votings, a member of various women's suffrage organizations. So she saw how much women could do in terms of influencing public opinion and was eager to encourage women to be activists as well. Her legacy is as someone who had a very radical voice at the turn of the century, which was in many ways not a very radical time. She was a female leader in a time we usually associate with male leadership. To me, she was someone who was so consistently activist and so principled about it that she sort of, in a way, encourages us all to kind of look inside ourselves and ask whether we're doing enough.
The enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
Here.
Yep, just a couple troublemaking punks. Somebody thinks we're the enemy of the people. That's an honor.
The enemy of the people,
That's right.
I call them.
Wear it with pride. Don't run away from it. You hear that, Democrats?
So,
Grow a pair.
is that it for today?
I think so.
Okay.
There's a lot there.
So
There to digest.
that's it for us. How about you?
And remember about the revolution?
Yes, the
Revolution's
revolution's coming. Yeah.
Revolution's there.
Yeah.
You get that fire in your eye.
The revolution is just about here.
Revolution is coming. Revolution is near. When you get that fire in your eyes, the revolution is just about here.
The enemy of the people, and they are. They are the enemy of the people.
The enemy of the people, I call them.
I'm against the people.